Hi everyone, welcome to the RTS Guided Programming Coaching Call. I'm Mike Tushir. Got a lot of questions for you today. I've been out of town, which is why but I'm back now, and we're going to get caught up on all this stuff. So with that said, let's kind of dive right into things. As usual, we're going to start off with executing the workout questions, and then we'll progress into some other questions a little bit later on. So getting started here. First question up says, lunges are for sets of 5. That's what's in my program this week. Could you explain how to do them, i.e., do I alternate legs and do 5 reps per leg so the set actually comes to 10 reps? Yes, exactly. You're going to, anytime we have a unilateral movement in there, what I'm wanting you to do is to do that number of reps per limb. So 5 reps of lunges is going to be 5 reps each leg. A lot of unilateral stuff like that for lower body. Something like a dumbbell bench is pretty obvious. We're definitely talking about 5 reps each, for each arm. But since you do them at the same time, you don't have the same type of confusion. But yeah, bottom line is you're exactly each leg. Next question up says, for pin squats, do you recommend placing the pins at competition depth or at the weakest point in the range of motion, just above parallel in my case? Well, the most direct answer to your question, yes, I recommend placing them at competition depth. The reason for that is for most people, that's going to be at their weakest range of motion or very close to it. Even though, like that parallel position, 90-degree knee flexion position is the point where most people are slowest. It's kind of right at that bottom position. That's where most people exhibit weak range of motion. So we end up killing 2 birds with 1 stone by placing the pins at the bottom. It's a good habit of going to full competition depth every time. That's really a big part of it as well. I want you to get in the habit of going to full depth every time and not cutting it short or anything like that. So yeah, set them at competition depth. It's a rare case where the weak range of motion is so significantly different that I would advise moving the pins. However, if you're concerned that you might fall into that group, send in a video and we'll get that reviewed for you. That's all of the executing the workout questions. Let's move on to some program modification questions. This first one up says, prior to powerlifting, I played rugby for 4.5 years. So now my left shoulder gets agitated. I've gone to the doctor. Everything's all clear. Nothing's broken. Last week, push press and incline press, I had my shoulder aching a bit. So being so close to my meet, I don't have time to do a lot of recovery, and I definitely can't risk injury. So can you please advise me on altering my workout to minimize overhead and intense shoulder movements? Yeah, certainly. First of all, there should not be any movements that we're training in the program that cause you pain or cause injuries to flare up or anything like that. If there are, do exactly what you did, write in, and we'll get some modifications to you. In the future, it won't take so long to get these modifications to you, but for now, no time like the present, I suppose. What you should do moving forward from here. Clearly, don't do anything that's going to irritate your shoulder, but the intent behind the overhead movements is to primarily strengthen the shoulders. There's a little bit going on with scapular movements and things like that, but that's something that's not really my area, and something that you're going to need a physical therapist or a movement specialist or somebody like that to help advise you the ideal thing would be to return to function so that you can get back to you want pain-free. That's so in the meantime, doing some movements to work around that are warranted. Like I said, the idea is to train the shoulders. So one thing to keep in mind will be dumbbell options. If you can do dumbbell overhead work, that's great, but I'm assuming that you probably can't. So dumbbell bench would be good. You could do dumbbell incline if that's not causing pain as well. So just dumbbell movements. You could do dips if they don't cause problems. They do seem to cause problems for a lot of people, so your mileage is going to vary there. Also, close grip benching. And lastly, don't forget about reverse grip benching. Any of those are going to be helpful for applying stress to the shoulder muscles and help to develop your shoulders. So you could even go as far as doing delt training, in terms of like front raises and things like that. Use a cable or use a band or just kind of your classic dumbbell front raises. Anything like that is going to work just fine. The idea is to train your shoulders. So as long as you're training your shoulders, it's a supplemental movement. So this is the lowest priority work that we've got. So as long as you're training your shoulders in some capacity, I think you're going to be fine. So certainly swap out those overhead movements, do something that's not causing you a lot of pain. The stuff that I mentioned, I think are good ideals, some good substitutes. But if you can't do those for some reason, let me know and we'll keep working on it. You're here right. I see that you're here right now, and but you're on the phone. I'm not sure if you can raise your hand. I'm pretty sure you can't type in a question or anything. So I guess just shoot me an email if any of that stuff is not going to work for you, and we'll follow up and try to continue chasing down this problem until we get it solved. All right. Next question says, so the first workout that I did this week, I had a pretty significant pull on my left lower back. Squats and deadlifts are painful. Arching on the bench even is painful. Any tips on how to progress this week? I have a feeling I'm aggravating an old injury, but it hurts regardless. Let's see, a pretty significant pull. It sounds like you've experienced a muscle strain. Just going off of your description here, usually when people are talking about pulling muscle, they're talking about a strain. If you've got a strained muscle in your lower back to the point where even arching on the bench is going to be uncomfortable, basically you're to the point where you need to take some time off. You can do a search on the forum for reintroduction or injury or something like that, and you'll see in the past where we've talked about reintroduction protocols. In general, what we're talking about is it goes something like this. The first thing that you need to do is to return to pain-free movement. So in a lot of cases, that means that you're going to need to rest, move as much as you can, but don't re-injure it, certainly, and don't cause a lot of pain. Move as much as you can through pain-free range of motion. And we're talking about unloaded movement. We're talking about just moving around, day-to-day stuff, day-to-day life stuff, but then, just try to move, keep it pain-free range of motion. And once you get to the point where you can do like body weight movements, like so body weight squats and things like that, without any pain, and I mean no pain, not even like a weird tingle or anything like that, discomfort, all that stuff should be gone. When you can return to full range of motion, pain-free movement, then you can start the reintroduction process. So the standard reintroduction process, we go with is based on percentage. We start with 15%, and we're talking about doing the injured lifts for 2 sets of 10 reps, 2 to 3 sets of 10 reps. So the first 15%, we follow that with 30%, then 45%, then 60%, right? So how fast you go through this progression depends on how fast you're healing up. If you've got a pretty severe strain and it's taken a while for it to heal up, then you're going to progress like 1 level per week. So for the first week, you'll do 2 to 3 sessions of 15%, 2 or 3 sets of 10. Then the second week, you'll do 2 or 3 sets of 10 with 30%, and then 45, and then 60. So that would be a 4-week-long reintroduction. If your injury is healing rapidly, and I mean it's actually healing rapidly, not that you want it to heal rapidly. If it's actually healing rapidly, then you can progress through a bit faster and do maybe that. But you're going to want to give it some time and give it a little bit longer than you think it needs, because the worst thing that can happen to you in an injury reintroduction sort of setting is to get re-injured. So take your time, reintroduce to it. It won't be as bad as you think. If there are things that you can do to work around it, then I definitely recommend that you do that. So for instance, you talk about having a pull in your lower back. Can you do leg press without pain? If you can, then that would be something that you should do. But it has to be without pain, without weirdness. You know, the whole idea is to get you returning to function. And if a leg press causes re-injury, then that's the opposite of helpful. You know, if you need to go to leg extensions and leg curls, at least it's something. You know, same sort of thing with, you know, machine work as far as training your upper body, doing some pull downs or whatever you can do to help keep yourself in shape and keep developing muscularly without re-injuring that tissue is going to be helpful. And just to speak from experience for a moment here before we move on, I've done this for SI joints myself, and when I've done this, I come back and hit a PR not terribly long after the reintroduction phase. And I attribute that to a large extent because I work around it. I know for myself, whenever I get these SI joint injuries, that I can still do lunges, I can still do split squats and things like that. So if you can manage that, you know, then you definitely have a leg up, and it's going to help you when you decide to come back. All right, next question says, if someone identifies a muscle weakness that's affecting a power lift, for example, a glute weakness impacting the squat, hindering external rotation, etc., could we perhaps add glute bridges or more lunges to the priority workouts? Yeah, definitely. That's part of what we want to happen from a guided programming standpoint. So the whole idea of guided programming is that it's guided. We have our original programming that you're getting sent each week, and then we want to guide you through making these modifications so that you're able to tailor it as much as you want, basically. I would caution you, I find that a lot of people have a little bit of trouble diagnosing muscular weaknesses. So send in a video and we'll take a look at those, but in general, that's going to be a good thing. You know, and what we hope to come up with is, you know, replace your squat supplemental work with additional glute bridges or additional lunges or whichever movements we decide would be most helpful for you. You know, so if we decide front squats are not going to be helpful, but glute bridges will be, you know, then we definitely want you to make that switch. Send in the video though, and we can talk about, you know, what are appropriate movements for this stage of the annual plan, and you know, we can get as much into the weeds as you want, and as as much as we can in a format like this. I think that you'd be surprised at how much customization can actually happen. All right, next question says, although my meet is in December and the new contest dates are open till the end of the year, is there still a gym test scheduled on October 11th or any other date? If you have a meet in December, that's far enough. It's really your call. If you want to go ahead and do the gym test in October, you're more than welcome to. If you want to go ahead and start training for your December contest now, you're more than welcome to do that too. At this point, it's kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. It's up to you. I'm happy to make that work either way. For those of you who don't have a meet scheduled, we are going to run up to a test on October 11th or thereabout, within a few days of that. So yeah, so that will be something to consider. Yeah, I think if I didn't answer your question quite how you asked it or quite how you intended, let me know and we'll reattack on that. Next up, I want to tell you guys about Track. I'm sure most of you have seen by now that we've got a new version of Track out, and I just kind of want to go through that with you quickly. Stand by just one moment and I'll pull that up. All right. Okay, so this is the new RTS homepage. It's updated. It looks way better. But if you log in and using this button at the already logged there, and then go to Apps and Track, to a page that looks like this. If you don't have access to this page, let me know and I'll see if I can get. Well, I will get you access because all of you enrolled in guided program and should be using it. A static heart rate test, which hopefully you're familiar with. If you're not, then we have these sweet tooltips here that you can open up and get familiar with. Guide that will walk you through the orthostatic heart rate test. If you don't have a heart rate monitor, if you don't want to do the small children at home and your mornings are always disrupted, whatever, if you're not going to do this heart rate test, that is now in this version of Track perfectly okay. We can get a really good result without the heart rate test. So you just go to skip and next, and that takes you to our subjective questions. Answer all of these it's asking for. You can open up the tooltip and check it out. Answer all these subjective questions and then submit your answer. And from that will open up actually it'll open up your action items page, which I haven't done a track test for this morning, but I'll show you my track test from yesterday. So for instance, this is my track test from yesterday. It also tells me about my just different things going on with my fatigue and my ability to process fatigue. So you can dig more into this data if you like. We can get into trend analysis and you can see how is your fatigue load functioning, and then you can see what your recovery rate has been. And you can also see what the training recommendations you're getting told to continue training as normal, or if Track is recommending that you make modifications to your training or not. We can look at short-term fatigue. So short-term fatigue, so that's fatigue over the last 4 days. And then we have short-term training volume. So if we look at this, we can see for me, Clearly, the higher the training volume, the higher the fatigue. That's. Then the interesting thing is today's result is this red dot. You can see that it's slightly above the average. So this green line is your trend line, and then the gray lines represent the trend line. So you can tell if you're getting really far outside of what's normal for you in terms of fatigue. Then this bottom fatigue and your change in volume. You can see that a big increase in volume leads to a big increase in fatigue. A big decrease in volume leads to a big decrease in fatigue. That seems like that's intuitive, and it should be, because this is linked to your recovery rate. So what we can, this green line, trend line. If you go above the trend line, then that means you are experiencing more fatigue a given volume load. Basically, your recovery is worse if you go toward the red. If you go toward the blue, then your recovery rate is better. If you, this is basically your fatigue load over the last 30 days. And we can see if you're burning too hot or too cold in your training overall. This is right about where we want you to be, is kind of on this borderline between green and yellow. Get up into the red, then something needs to change, and if you get down in the blue, something needs to change. Track will take care of you for a while, but if you make some bigger changes, and that's basically the nuts and bolts of how to use track. Hopefully it's a lot more intuitive and a lot more user-friendly than. All right, so let me head back over to our slideshow. All right, and we did have a question come in while I was talking, so let me see what that question is. All right, this question says, if we train early in the morning, can we fill out the track the night before, or do you recommend just getting up earlier and doing it in the morning that we train? On how much of track you want to do. If you want to do the heart rate test, it's best if you do it first thing in the morning when you wake up. It's just there's a lot fewer variables that we have to try to control for. However, in that case, I would almost recommend just skipping the heart rate test. Just do the subjective. Once you're familiar with the questions, you go through that subjective test really quickly, and you're on your way. That's kind of the direction that we're trying to go. You can answer those subjective questions, and we get a really good picture, even without the heart rate information. The way that the test is set up, the way that those subjective questions and the way that the answers to the subjective questions are set up, it gets us a really good result. So I think you'd be surprised at the accuracy that we can deliver even with just the subjective questions. And in a case like that, that's kind of the direction that I would steer you toward. So let me know if you've got any other questions in addition to that one. All right. So we've only got one other miscellaneous question this week. This one says, when we're first getting started with guided programming, should we provide our Wilks based on raw totals or geared totals? And you should definitely do that based on your raw totals. That's how it's set up. It's set up to look at your raw totals and kind of respond to raw totals. So that would definitely be ideal. All right, it's time to check out some videos. We've got quite a few videos this week, so bear with me for just a moment while I get those pulled up. Okay, here we go. First up, we've got Jake's squat video. He wants us to review this for technique. So let's give this a watch. All right. Well, my first thought on your first rep there was that you weren't tight enough at the on the descent, but it got better as you went. I think that as fatigue at handling you to get tighter, basically. So, unheard of by any stretch. It's something that happens pretty regularly, to be honest, even among more experienced squatters. That's not something I think that you can actively go out. You'll get better at with time, being tighter and exhibiting more control over it. But other than that, that I wanted to critique. Just make sure that you're really bracing your abs hard. See, you did it on that rep. It was just that first rep. I don't think you were totally set and braced hard before the descent, but everything else looked fine. All right, next video up is Jake's bench. So let's take a look at this one. All right, I'd like to see you tighten your lats a bit more. So what that's going to mean is tuck your elbows just a bit. You know, I definitely don't want to make it a dramatic thing, but tuck the elbows, bend the bar just a little bit, and it's going to lead to a slightly lower touch as well. And I think that's going to you're flaring on the way up, which is good. That's what we want you to do. The timing of that flare is going to be a little bit weird at first um, once you change your descent. That it could take a session or two to get your timing down. Not bad. I see that you're arched. You arched what appears to be as much as you can. Your feet are in a good position. Your butt stays down. You're showing good leg drive. So not a whole lot to critique. This is Jake's bench from another angle. So we're going to check this and see if we see anything different. Okay, so from this one, I see that there's many I would like to see. So keep some tension on with your legs. Like you've got pretty good timing for your leg drive, but just push a little bit more with your legs early on, and I think you'll be all right. Again, I see the issue about tightening your lats. I think that's going to be something that's helpful for you. Yeah, so let's move on. And then kind of lastly for Jake, we've got a deadlift here to check out. So let's take a look at this one. All right. So you mentioned in the question that you sent in that you're a little concerned that with the lighter weights and without a belt, you're able to stay flat. But then once the weights get heavier and you put a belt on, that your back starts to round a bit. Now the first 2 reps of this set, you stayed flat. But then as the set wore on, I noticed that you're really rushing your setup for each rep. And I'm almost certain that that's where that rounding is coming from. So let's watch this again. See, so here you're flat and you stay flat. You drop down, you start to pull, and you stay pretty flat. Same there. Slightly rounded, but that's definitely acceptable. See, so on this 3rd rep, you rush the setup. You don't stop in that bottom position anymore. And same for the 4th one. It's like as the set wears on and it gets a little harder, you're kind of rushing that bottom position. You're rushing that setup just a touch. So just be deliberate. Slow it down just a little bit and be deliberate for every rep. Get into a nice solid bottom position. Robert's squat to look at, which is not on YouTube. Cool. All right, we can all see this. So let's check out Robert's squat. So one of the first things that I noticed is that the descent is slow. So I would be curious to know why the descent is slow. It could be that you're feeling the volume, and I mean that's a good enough reason to slow down your descent. But you want to work toward bringing just a touch more speed, not so much that you lose control, not so much that you lose tightness. Speed, and I think you'll get a better stretch reflex out of the bottom. I don't remember offhand if you mentioned depth in your email or not. Your depth is, let's take a look at it again, but it seems questionable to me on first view. Yeah, I would say depth is, I mean, you're close, but I don't think it's quite there, depending on where you're going to be lifting at. Yeah, I can see that you're going to a limit range of motion, so there's going to need to be some other technical changes to accompany this. You're either going to need to sit back into your squat just a little bit more, and for things like this, a little goes a long way. So if you sit back a little bit more, that may may need to make some stance adjustments. My feeling though is that it looks like a charm. So try to get them down there just a little bit more, and I think that's going to work. All right. So next up, we're going to take a look at this one for technique as well. All right, you break at the knee. Some coaches are going to tell you is a problem. I don't think it's necessarily a problem. It's just something that your bottom position is good. Your bottom position, the only thing, your knees are in a little bit. They look like they're in evenly. I wonder what it would look like if you narrowed your stance, like, I mean, just a little bit, like an inch on each side. I wonder what that would make your squats look like. But I mean, from what I see here, I don't see anything that's problematic. It's just, small potatoes, just minor stuff. Um, yeah. Break first. I think some other coaches would have other things to say. None of this stronger, which you certainly seem to be. Yeah, looks good to me. And then let's take a look at Spencer's bench press. Nice. And again, not a whole lot to say. That actually looks pretty darn good. I wonder if you could get a bit more of a critique that I have there, but everything else looks fine. You seem pretty tight. Things are tucked in and well under control. So not a whole lot to add to your bench press. All right. Let's get through these, get to some new photos. What do you say? Something a little different. There we go. That's close enough. All right, we got a couple explanation type questions. So the first explanation question that we have here says, in terms of the variation of lifts specified in the program, for instance, we're asked to perform 3 reps on the floor press at an RPE of 8. I'm guessing most people wouldn't have attempted a 1 rep max on the floor press. Could we possibly calculate the working weight from a 1 rep max on the standard bench press? Unfortunately, no, you really can't. And the reason is everybody is different in this way, that some people are going to be strong on the floor press relative to their bench, and some people are going to be weak on the floor press relative to their bench. And you don't really know which one you are until you do some floor press. And once you've done some floor press, on one hand, yeah, now you know if you're strong or weak relative to your bench, but you also know with a pretty good idea where your floor press estimated 1 rep max is at. And if you have an estimated 1 rep max floor press, now you can compare floor press to itself. So really all I'm asking you to do is, if you have a movement that you've never done before, like say a floor press, just give it a shot once, and then you get an idea of where you're at, and you build on that and you refine it in the next session. And then each session you not only get stronger, but you refine your idea of where you're at a little bit better. Yeah. So that's why we really can't pin it to the competition lift, just because there's a lot of variation. If you've never done floor press before, chances are you're not going to be that great at it. But if you have a vast experience doing floor press, you might be really good at it. And all the lifts are going to kind of reflect that same type of relationship. All right, next question says, I just received a program for next week. All the reps are 4 or more with repeats or multiple down sets. I'm 4 weeks out from Raw Nationals, and this feels like volume. I was thinking that we would be lower reps this close. What am I not understanding? Basically that given the RPEs that we're doing, we're still working with pretty high percentages of your 1 rep max. We're also, doing 4s is fairly specific. And not everybody is doing 4s, so not everybody training for Raw Nationals is going to be doing 4 rep sets. It depends on the strategy that we have employed. Given where you're at in the strategy that we're using, this is going to be a good thing for you. So the problem that you see, you hear about this a lot. Guys miss their peak, right? Like, well, I did such and such for triple in the gym, and they miss it entirely at the meet, or whatever the scenario is. what I've ascertained from coaching is that a lot of the reason that people miss their peak is that they drop the volume too much. So when you reduce your reps, you definitely do raise the intensity, at least in the way that if you're training the way that we're training, you're going to be raising your intensity. The problem is that you're also reducing your volume. And if you make that volume drop too early, you're going to miss the peak. In addition, we're getting, this feels like volume. Um, I mean, it is fairly high volume, and it's going to remain fairly high volume. The intensity will get higher. For instance, next week, let's see where are we at now. We're about 3 weeks out from Raw Nationals. So next week should be the highest intensity week. But then we'll reduce the intensity slightly and get you some more volume in so we don't miss your peak. It's definitely heavy enough that you'll be used to handling heavy weights. It's not going to feel oppressive or anything like that when you get under the bar. It will feel good, and you'll continue to build strength right up into the meet. And a big part of that is by pushing the volume that we're pushing and developing things the way that we are. But by not dropping the volume too early, we'll maintain that form and be able to hit that peak on time. All right, last explanation type question. As someone who strives to be a student of the sport of powerlifting, I'm always trying to expand my knowledge and understanding. I was hoping to have a little bit of discussion as to how the programming for my group is structured and the rationale behind our current programming towards October 11th. I'd like to know if we're training with blocks, what blocks we're doing, how long is each block, how the training is periodized, how it's structured, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take this one at a time, and hopefully we can get into this more and more as the weeks go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the philosophy for this. It gets a little tricky to answer a question like this in this type of context because we have different training groups, and different training groups are using different strategies. So the is kind of our mid-level training group. If your Wilks is between 300 and 375, you're probably, although not certainly, in the mid-level training group. And that's using a strategy that I've been calling the Kansas strategy. Just name them sometimes, So this one's called the Kansas strategy. Now, what we see with the Kansas strategy is that the RPEs remain a little bit higher. You'll see more 9 RPE type work in the Kansas strategy. That's because you need to learn how to push through those difficult sets. You need to learn how to grind a little bit. So the 9 RPEs can help teach you to do that a little bit better than the very low RPEs will. You also won't see a whole lot of heavy singles because it for people at that level. The way that the blocks are structured, you will have developmental blocks which focus a little bit more on training volume. The intent, though, behind the developmental block is to develop core systems. So you can think of it a little bit like an accumulation block from block periodization. It is a little bit different. We're trying to develop core systems for the movement as a whole, but it still has a primary emphasis of developing weak ranges of motion. But it's developmental in nature. The second block is a specialization block. Specialization blocks, similar, it still develops the movement as a whole with a primary emphasis on weak range of motion. But since it's specialization, it's not developmental in nature. It's not trying to develop fundamental abilities, like it's not trying to develop hypertrophy as much. Now we're specializing in a skill. We're specializing in a task. We're trying to specialize that lifter develop specific strengths, specific weak range of motion, things like that. We're taking a more specific approach. Then the final training block is a sport form block that is more integrative in nature. It's trying to bring together everything that we've trained so far into a sporting peak. In the Kansas strategy, each of those blocks are longish, 3 to 5 weeks, with 4 weeks being average, typically separated by a deload week. That's not always the case. It depends on our timing and kind of what's going on, with the training schedule as a whole. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background on how the periodization is structured for that group, for that strategy, really. Now there are other strategies out there. There's a ton of other strategies, several other that we use in guided programming, and then we can talk into a lot more detail about contents of loading and movement selection and stuff like that. So if you have any questions about that, or you have interest in that, send in some questions and we'll continue on having these discussions as time is available, which it seems like it very easily could be. So with that, that's all the questions that I had sent in so far. So if there are any other questions from you guys here in the audience today, if you could put up your hand, and we'll see if we can get those questions answered for you. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Oh, we do. So, all right, Olivia, let me see if I can unmute you. I think you're on the phone, so you won't be able to type in that question. Stand by just 1 second. Let me see if I can sort this. Oh, you can type it in. That's cool. Okay. This question is, what email is best to ask questions? Either one is fine. Power275@gmail.com or mike@reactivetrainingsystems.com. Either one is fine with me. Yeah, just send them in and I'll get them answered for you. I don't think we have any other questions. If we do, let me know, and we'll get those answered as well. But again, I just want to apologize that we did have kind of a break in guided programming calls there. I don't see that happening anytime soon, so we'll be back on our regularly scheduled program. You can check the RTS calendar for next week's call time and date. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, go ahead and send those in. I'd be happy to answer them for you. So good luck with your training next week. As always, remember to take what's there and build some momentum, and we'll see you next time.